my preferred way of sitting is always in a circle. So consider yourself sitting in a circle. And with it, I hope, comes that this is more of a conversation than anything else. So I urge you to interrupt, to ask, now with the light being what it is so that Marie can follow us. I may not see a raised hand, so just be rude and interrupt. The purpose of this is conversation, and in this, all the three of us will try to bring to you the uniqueness of Voice of Women, seen in the mind, certainly, in the place and time of its beginning. And it may be quite difficult for some of you who are younger to see how Voice of Women came out of a particular time. So I will emphasize what I see now, half a century later, as the essential social function, the place in the scheme of things, the context. And as feminists, it seemed to me the most important thing is the relationship between content and context. And that's also the stuff that gets lost as you teach, as you talk, as the context changes and the content has to adapt itself. And so if I'm successful in any way in my part of this conversation, it is for you to either remember or create in your minds a context. The context is between the 60s and the 70s. I will refer back to the political events to which women responded. But number one is that Voice of Women was created and is a women's peace movement. And each of those three words has a real meaning to the organization and the conduct of its members. There is the fact that it is a women's movement. It reaches out to women across national borders, across borders of economic, historical development. It is a women's movement based on the communality, the inescapable and unavoidable communality that we all are women. It is also a peace movement based in the time on the realization of the indivisibility and communality of peace. Peace being more than just the absence of war, but the presence of justice, is clearly indivisible. And in the acute experience of what atomic weapons did to humanity, the peace, the women's peace movement is based on the fact that if there's peace for some, it can only be because there has to be peace for all. Peace is indivisible. And the fallout from nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons testing made it very clear that one had to face up to two things. One is there's no escaping, there's no neutrality. You get the fallout, whether you like it or not, whether you are for it or against the issue. There is no neutrality if you want to avoid it for your children, you have to stop it for all children. The communality of the need for peace links itself to the communality of being women. And the third is that this is and has been perceived as a movement rather than as a party, as a church, as an organization. And the movement part meant move on, get some change done. None of us wanted to create an organization. We wanted to get something done so that we could do in peace what we intended to do. So do remember, this is a women's peace movement. And in that, there are then the three components of its activity. The women's component, you might envision, lies as a horizontal one, reaching out. The peace one is in a sense a vertical one, the depth to going into the reasons of things, to looking what else is there and can be done. That's the part in which substance has to be added to the desire of change, not just stop the nonsense, but also there are other ways of doing it, and we can show it. There is a big educational alternative component that becomes available to that horizontal stretch from those who do the consideration of alternatives. And then there's the movement part. That's the dynamics, the fact to say, now, move on. Don't just sit and give speeches. They all do some stupid stuff. Move on and get something done. And we give you a push, but we also know the system. We know how decisions are made. We know how things are run. Don't feed us bullshit. Get moving. So you have those components that you have to keep in mind as you then interpret what in fact happened. What happened in the 60s, imagine the height of the Cold War. The decade started in or ended, really, let me not waste my time too far or too much. The decade began with the real failure of summit meetings trying both to defuse the Cold War. Churchill had come back to be prime minister. In Britain, Stalin had died. The Soviet Union had sent the first craft into space. It was the time of Sputnik. Castro had taken over Cuba. It was the height of the Cold War. The height of more and more testing of more and more fancy weapons, and the height of more nuclear fallout, as well as the incoming